Imagine your neighborly friendship suddenly turning icy. One day you're sharing sugar, the next, there's a wall of tariffs between you. That's the reality for the US and Canada, as a trade war erupts and 5 major companies face collapse. It all escalated under the Trump administration, when economic walls replaced handshakes. Businesses that thrived on open borders are now casualties in a political crossfire. The first victims? Not politicians, but workers and iconic brands. This isn't just about numbers, it's about jobs, communities, and the future of North American trade. So buckle up, we're revealing which companies are struggling to survive as Canada's boycott sends shockwaves across the continent. Let's dive in. First up, General Motors, a symbol of American industry, now caught in the trade war's headlights. For over a century, GM has been a cornerstone of the US economy, representing not just cars, but the hopes and livelihoods of millions of workers and their families. But today, the company finds itself at a crossroads, facing challenges that threaten its very foundation. For decades, the US and Canadian auto industries were seamlessly connected, with parts and cars crossing the border multiple times before reaching the showroom floor. This cross-border cooperation created a tightly woven supply chain, where a single car might contain components from both countries, assembled in a dance of efficiency and trust. The border was more a line on a map than a barrier, and both nations prospered from this partnership. Then, almost overnight, tariffs hit. Suddenly, steel and aluminum, the lifeblood of car manufacturing, became much more expensive. GM's costs soared, and so did the prices of their vehicles. What used to be a predictable business model was now thrown into chaos, as every car rolling off the line carried a heavier price tag, making it harder to compete both at home and abroad. Canada, unwilling to take the hit lying down, retaliated by slapping tariffs on American vehicles. Suddenly, selling cars in Canada, one of GM's biggest and most reliable markets, became a losing game. The cost of doing business skyrocketed, and the company found itself squeezed from both sides of the border. Canadian consumers, feeling the pinch in their wallets and a surge of national pride, began turning away from American brands. GM's sales in Canada plummeted, and dealership lots that were once bustling with activity now stood eerily quiet, filled with unsold cars gathering dust. The fallout was swift and severe. GM shuttered its historic Oshawa plant, a facility that had been a pillar of the community for generations. Thousands of workers lost their jobs overnight, and the ripple effects devastated local businesses, schools, and families who had depended on the plant for their livelihoods. But the pain didn't stop at the border. The chaos in Canada sent shockwaves back to the United States, disrupting supply chains and threatening jobs in Michigan and Ohio. Factories that once hummed with activity now faced uncertainty, as parts shortages and falling demand forced layoffs and cutbacks. GM's so-called restructuring was less a strategic pivot and more a desperate scramble to survive a political mess. Executives faced tough questions from the media, anxious shareholders, and worried employees, all while trying to navigate a landscape that seemed to shift with every new headline. The lesson here is clear: in a globalized industry, building economic walls doesn't just hurt your rivals, it hurts everyone. Factories close, jobs vanish, and entire communities are left to pick up the pieces. GM, once an industrial powerhouse that symbolized American ingenuity and strength, now faces an uncertain future. The contrast between the company's glory days and its current struggles is stark, a sobering reminder that trade wars have real human costs that go far beyond the balance sheets. The hum of the assembly line in Oshawa is gone, replaced by silence and uncertainty. Where there was once the steady rhythm of industry, there is now only the echo of what was lost. And the road ahead for GM? It's bumpier than ever, filled with potholes of political risk, economic uncertainty, and the challenge of rebuilding trust on both sides of the border. For GM and its workers, the journey is far from over, and the outcome is anything but certain. Next, Harley-Davidson, the American icon, now a casualty of cross-border politics. When the US imposed tariffs, Canada hit back, targeting Harley with steep duties. Suddenly, Canadian riders faced thousands more for their dream bike, and sales tanked. Harley's core US market was already shrinking, so losing Canada was a major blow. To survive, Harley shifted some production overseas, sparking outrage at home and attacks from US leaders. The brand's rebel image took a hit, and its stock price nosedived. Canadian buyers, once loyal, now saw Harley as overpriced and politically charged. the company was squeezed by shrinking demand and a brutal trade war. Even the toughest brands can get wounded when politics enters the picture. For Harley, the open road suddenly looks a lot less free. Now, let's cross the border to Maple Leaf Foods, a Canadian staple that for decades has been a symbol of national pride and a household name. Known for their deli meats, bacon, and ready-to-eat meals, Maple Leaf Foods has long enjoyed a reputation for quality and reliability. But recently, this iconic company found itself on unexpectedly shaky ground, facing challenges that threatened its very foundation. For years, their business thrived on exporting to the United States. The U.S. market was a major source of revenue, with millions of dollars worth of products crossing the border every month. But then, new tariffs were introduced, making it suddenly much more expensive and complicated to sell their goods south of the border. Shipments were delayed, paperwork piled up, and profits began to shrink as costs soared. Back home in Canada, a powerful Buy Canadian movement was gaining momentum. Shoppers, eager to support local businesses, started paying closer attention to where their food came from. Grocery aisles were filled with patriotic signs, and news outlets ran stories encouraging Canadians to choose homegrown products. But for Maple Leaf Foods, this surge in national pride brought its own set of problems. Despite their Canadian roots, Maple Leaf's global supply chain drew suspicion. Consumers and critics began to question whether their products were truly Canadian, or if they were simply assembled from imported ingredients. The company faced intense scrutiny over the origins of their meat, the sources of their packaging, and even the authenticity of their branding. In response, Maple Leaf was forced to launch defensive marketing campaigns, holding press conferences and rolling out new packaging to reassure customers, but the damage was done. Stuck between punishing U.S. tariffs and growing skepticism at home, Maple Leaf's growth stalled. Factory lines slowed, workers worried about their jobs, and financial reports showed a sharp decline in sales and profits. The company, once a leader in the industry, now found itself struggling to keep up. Their ambitious U.S. expansion, once seen as a path to prosperity, had turned into a financial headache. Meanwhile, the Canadian market became fiercely competitive, with rival brands eager to capitalize on Maple Leaf's troubles. Executives scrambled to find solutions, but the pressure was mounting from all sides. The ongoing trade war poisoned trust on both sides of the border. Even something as simple as buying bacon became a political act, with shoppers divided over which country's products to support. News reports highlighted the growing rift, and Maple Leaf Foods found itself caught in the middle of a battle it never wanted to fight. In a desperate bid to adapt, Maple Leaf scrambled to rework its supply chains, seeking new partners and alternative routes. Logistics teams worked around the clock, rerouting shipments and negotiating with suppliers. But despite their best efforts, uncertainty lingered and the future remained unclear. The lesson here is clear. Even the most patriotic brands with deep roots and loyal customers can get caught in the crossfire of international politics and shifting consumer sentiment. No company is immune to the ripple effects of global events. For Maple Leaf Foods, the cold shoulder came from both neighbors and their own backyard. Once celebrated as a national treasure, the company now faces an uncertain road ahead. Learning the hard way that in today's world, loyalty and trust can be as fragile as the markets themselves. Walmart, retail giant, now tripped up by tariffs and shifting loyalties. Walmart Canada relied on a steady flow of U.S. goods to keep prices low, but tariffs on everything from ketchup to toilet paper forced Walmart to choose absorb costs or raise prices. Either way, they lost. Higher prices angered shoppers and profit margins shrank. Canadian consumers, fired up by politics, started favoring local stores like Loblaws and Sobeys. Walmart's sales stagnated, and foot traffic slowed as shoppers made patriotism part of their grocery list. The company scrambled to find Canadian suppliers, but reworking supply chains is a massive, slow-moving task. Walmart's local store image was overshadowed by its American roots. Even the world's biggest retailer couldn't escape the fallout when shopping became a political act. In this trade war, Walmart found itself on the wrong side of the border. Once a symbol of American innovation and dominance in the skies, Boeing now finds itself grounded, not by technical failures but by a series of strategic missteps that have shaken its reputation and business relationships around the world. The company, long considered an aerospace titan, is facing turbulence of its own making, with consequences that reach far beyond the runway. The trouble began when Boeing set its sights on Canada's Bombardier, a rising competitor in the commercial jet market. Claiming unfair government subsidies, Boeing lobbied the US government to impose massive tariffs, nearly 300%, on Bombardier's C-Series jets, a move that sent shockwaves through the aviation industry and made international headlines. To Canada, this aggressive action felt like economic bullying. The Canadian government, led by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, responded with outrage, warning that such hostility would have serious consequences. Protests erupted, and officials openly threatened to cancel lucrative military contracts with Boeing, signaling a major diplomatic rift between the two allies. When Boeing refused to back down, Canada followed through on its threat, scrapping a $5 billion deal to buy new fighter jets from Boeing. Instead, Canada began exploring alternatives in Europe, opening the door to new partnerships and shifting billions of dollars away from the American manufacturer. The fallout didn't stop there. Major Canadian airlines like Air Canada and WestJet started to reconsider their future purchases from Boeing, worried about the company's reliability as a partner. Public sentiment in Canada soured, with travelers and business leaders alike questioning whether Boeing could be trusted to put relationships ahead of profit. Sensing an opportunity, European rival Airbus swooped in. They acquired a majority stake in Bombardier's jet program, rebranding the C-Series as the Airbus A220. With Airbus's global reach and resources, the jet quickly became a commercial success, turning what was once a threat to Boeing into a powerful new asset for its biggest competitor. In trying to crush a smaller rival, Boeing inadvertently strengthened Airbus, its fiercest competitor, and alienated a key ally in Canada. The move backfired spectacularly, shifting the balance of power in the global aviation industry and leaving Boeing to deal with the fallout. The lesson here is clear: in the interconnected world of global business, political relationships and trust matter just as much as the quality of your products. Companies that ignore this reality risk not only losing contracts, but also damaging their reputation and long-term prospects. Boeing learned this lesson the hard way. You can't take aggressive legal action against your own customers and expect them to remain loyal. The cost isn't just measured in lost sales, but in lost trust, a currency that's much harder to earn back. Today, the skies over Canada are friendlier to Airbus than to Boeing. Canadian airlines are investing in Airbus planes, and passengers are boarding jets that were once the pride of Bombardier, now flying under a European flag. Sometimes a trade war means losing more than just contracts. It means losing trust, partnerships, and a place in the future of an industry. For Boeing, the cost of this miscalculation will be felt for years to come. From GM's silent factories to Walmart's empty aisles, the US-Canada trade war left real scars. Political decisions unraveled decades of partnership, costing jobs and shaking communities. These stories prove that no company is too big to fail when politics trumps cooperation. The US and Canada share more than a border, they share an economic fate. When that bond frays, even icons stumble and rivals rise. What do you think? Necessary tough love or a costly mistake? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more deep dives. Thanks for watching.